Well, hello, everybody. Pastor Randy here. Welcome to Making It Simple. Great to be with you today. My goodness, what a busy day I have had. So it's later in the day that I'm recording this than I normally would do, but wanted to take a few moments to spend our time together as I try to do every day. Some may ask why. Well, I like consistency. I like not only providing and doing what it is that I've set out to do and to teach and to share. I believe in a very important message that God has placed on my heart. But consistency is a good thing. Discipline is a good thing, and so I enjoy doing it. I appreciate those who like what I do, and it just means a lot to me. God has given me the ability, the opportunity to do it, and I really try to be a good steward with time. We all have our moments that we goof off or whatever, but I don't find the value in looking for a lot of excuses. I have the moment before I have more work to do. And so we're taping Making It Simple. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today as we continue in this look at Storms Never Last. In this last part of this series, we're looking at the storm of when others come against us. In particular, we've been looking at the life of Daniel. Daniel is a man of great faith, and he's one that is unashamed of that faith. He's found favor with the king, so he serves in a very high position. But those around him have come against him. Those around him have tried to find fault with him, but they couldn't do that. So they basically snookered the king. They caused him to sign something that later he would regret doing. But for political reasons and saving face and what have you, he wouldn't change his mind. It was a moment of a faith testing for Daniel that I'm sure he never anticipated. No one ever would, with the horrendous potential of what the outcome could be, would literally being eaten alive by a lion. Nobody could even imagine the tragedy and the horror and the pain and everything else that would go with that. So we see those that are against him, the storm of when others come against us. Oftentimes, they give no thought about the cost of that. They give no thought about the fallout from that because they're single visioned. They're tunnel visioned, if you will, of I just want my way. I don't really care what it takes to get there. They are out to try to do Daniel in. They're out to try and cause him to not have favor in the king's workplace or in the king's eyes or anything else. But see, they didn't just want him removed from office. They didn't just want him to be put out of town. They wanted him dead. So they're out to get him. And they know now the king has signed this decree, which said that no one was allowed to pray to anybody else but the king for a specified period of time. So they're out to catch him. Well, Daniel, again, he is completely aware. You got to remember, he's in the third from the top. I mean, he's in the high level of this administration. So he's very well aware of this decree that has been signed. But it didn't change anything about him. He went home and opened the window and continued to pray, unconcerned as to about who would hear that. Not being a jerk or, hey, I'm going to, just rebel against you. No, he was obedient to God because God was the only one that he served. We will see in this portion that we study today, the king would also recognize this because of the actions of Daniel. So he's at his house. He's praying. The window's open. Obviously, these ones that are determined to get him, they hear. And they catch him, if you will. And they haul him before the king to tell the king, your guy, yeah, look what he's done. He's been praying to God, not to you. See, the king never considered when he signed that decree that it would come at a personal cost to him. See, because he liked Daniel. Daniel was found great favor in his eyes. He trusted Daniel. Having been in leadership for many, many years in my life, both secularly at the sheriff's department and in the ministry, I should say, as a pastor, almost all of that being a senior pastor, having someone you can trust is priceless because there aren't many of them. This was who Daniel was to the king. He had no idea when he signed this that this was going to affect someone that he cared about. Again, many still to this day, 2023, thousands of years since this took place, they still don't think of the price of their actions until it becomes personal. In other words, you hear those old sayings, well, I never thought about that. I never realized that. But always it's after the fact. It's always at a moment where it's very well too late. Because in this position as being the king, again, not to be seen as weak, not to be seen as wish-wash or unstable or changing my mind, for political saving face, and I've said this before in other lessons, it wasn't going to change. And these ones that were demanding this and these ones that had caused him to sign this, they were going to make sure that he didn't change his mind. They were going to make sure, oh, no favors. You don't get to give Daniel a pass just because you like him or just because he works in your administration. No, he's got to go to the lion's den. So the king stood by his order. He did. He had this pressure that had placed on him. And we're told with a heavy heart, he sent Daniel to the lion's den, knowing good and well how bad that could go. Daniel knew how bad that could go. But the one thing that we don't read about any kind of resistance. We don't read about any kind of exchange verbally or any type of physical, resistance or anything like that. Because Daniel was obedient to God, even if it meant his life. Because he wasn't going to waver. He wasn't going to bend nor bow. I keep saying that. Friends, this is vital. This lesson about the life of Daniel, Daniel chapter 6, go back and read it for yourself, is so important today, right now, 2023. Read it. Understand the value of consistent faith. You either mean it or you don't. There's no gray area. Daniel meant it. He wasn't going to change his position. He wasn't going to waver. He wasn't going to put God on pause for these 30 days. He wasn't going to certainly pray to a false god and certainly not to a mere mortal. He was going to be obedient no matter what it cost. So the question I keep asking through this teaching time, are you ready to be Daniel? Are any of us ready to be Daniel? Are we that firm in our belief? Are we that firm in our faith that God will see us through? That storm will not last. See, because Daniel went. The king saw this. He saw Daniel's heart. He saw Daniel's perseverance. He saw the strength of his faith. And we're told that the king was so overwrought with emotion, he knew he was wrong. But he wasn't man enough. He wasn't strong enough as a leader to admit it. So rather than just openly say, you know what, I made a wrong decision. This is not right. And reverse it, he was going to let it happen. But internally, something was going on. He was overwrought. We're told he didn't eat. He couldn't sleep. See, friends, conviction, it's a powerful tool. Because in the process of all of this, Daniel's openness with his faith had planted seeds. This king, regardless of where he stood on his belief or not belief, obviously wasn't a relationship with the living God, but he knew that Daniel had one. And we're told that he said to Daniel, "Your God." So he's recognizing where Daniel stood. There was no question about it. He said, "Your God, to whom you are so loyal." This is a powerful testimony of Daniel's life. Publicly and privately, they were the same. He said, "This God, your God, to whom you are so loyal, he will get you out of this." Now that's a powerful statement from someone observing from the outside, because somewhere in the midst of all of this, Daniel was so open about his faith, was so willing to live out his faith in public, if you will. This king had been touched, even if he didn't know it. This king had seeds planted in his life because he paced the floor. He couldn't sleep. He was worried, sick over this because he knew it was wrong. And while we can scold, we can scowl, and we can be upset with him for his political leanings or whatever the case, conviction was eating away at his heart. But something in him told him Daniel's going to be okay. Did he have full grasp of that? Did he fully believe that? The conviction may at least bring a pause or question mark to that. But the fact is, he said it. He said, "He'll take care of you." We're told that the next morning, the king rushed down with great anticipation to where this event had taken place. Be it tragic or be it a miracle, no one knew at that time. And we're told that he audibly called out, "Daniel, Daniel, servant of the living God." Now I want you to think about those words for a minute. Here's the king whom Daniel worked for. But that's not how he was addressed. He said, "Daniel, servant of the living God." The king didn't say, "You work for me, you're my servant, you're my this." No. He said, "You serve God, period. That's who you are." Would anybody look at you and say that? Would anybody look at me and say that? And not just because I'm a pastor. Does our faith show that brightly, that boldly? He said, "Daniel, servant of the living God, whom you serve so loyally," in other words, openly and without shame. He said, "Has he saved you from the lions?" Daniel, after a restful night on a soft, cushy lion pillow, he answered, and he said, "O king, live forever." That was how his salutation, that's what he was called. He said, "My God sent his angels to close the mouths of the lions that they would not hurt me. I've been found innocent before God and before you. O king, I've done you no harm." Oh my goodness, friends. Think about that moment. Testimony, witness, seed planting like anything we've never seen before. Storms never last. Triumph follows trials. If you're a note taker, you should write that down. Triumph follows trials. You see, there's something about an amazing victory. We all love the comeback. This last year, this last season football and different sports. There's been the story of the comeback. Whether it's at halftime, whether it's at the fourth quarter, whatever the case. Some team would be down 20 points, 30 points. Remember the Vikings, they were playing and they were down like 30, 31 points or something like that by the third quarter. And they came back and actually won the game. This was like 30-something to nothing. And they came back. Everybody loves a comeback story. Everybody loves a miracle. Triumph follows trials because then we find out what's inside. We find out if we're a go-getter or a quitter. You see, Daniel could have easily gone into this. He could have gone a couple of different ways. He could have fought it every step of the way. Said, absolutely not. This is wrong. This is bogus. This is whatever. He could have fought it and screamed and had a fit. Or he could trust God. That was his two options. Because there was no third option. There was no middle ground here. The king, equally, he could have stuck with what he said he was going to do, or he could have changed his mind. There was no middle ground. And he didn't feel like there was one. All of this circles back to faith. How much do we trust God? The king didn't know God, not like Daniel. But he saw Daniel's faith, and he had enough faith in Daniel to believe that what Daniel believed would actually work. Think about that testimony. Do we live out our faith in such a way? The king did two things upon Daniel's proclamation. He too made a new proclamation. But the first thing that he did before that was the ones who had caused him to do what he did, or at least present him with the option. He didn't have to do it, but he did. But those that brought him this, he realized that their reasons were wrong. Their reasons were with bad intentions. They intended to wrong Daniel. They intended to end Daniel's life. He called for them and their families. And they were all tossed into the lion's den. And they didn't get a restful night. It tells us they were devoured. They were ripped to shreds. That sounds graphic. It sounds awful. But there are multiple times in life that we learn. Oftentimes those who intend to do wrong, it ends up coming back. I've seen it 1,000 times when I was on the road. People trying to hoodoo somebody or wrong somebody in some type of way. Oftentimes they were the ones that ended up having the real problem. Now they caused a lot of pain and hurt in other people's lives, but it ultimately came back. In life, sometimes we hear words like karma or whatever the case. Here, the king was angry. He was relieved that his friend, his fellow worker, his fellow cabinet member was okay. He was relieved because his conviction was heavy, that the thing that he had done that was awful, that he felt wrong about, had worked out. But he was angry at himself for being, allowing himself to be talked into something awful, but also angry at those who brought him the proposal. So they paid the ultimate price for this, no question about that. But then he issued a new decree. And I think it's important. I read this before a couple of days ago when we recorded the first part of this series, when I read the entirety of Daniel chapter 6. And if you haven't listened to that, I would encourage you to go back to part 1. It's all right here on this channel. But I want to read to you again verses 25 and 27. Got to put on the old readers here. And this is what King Darius published. It says, he published this proclamation to everyone, to every race, color, and creed. He says, peace to you, abundant peace. I decree, in other words, I order, that Daniel's God shall be worshipped. Shall be, there's that word. We see shall a lot. I like that word. Shall be worshipped and feared in all parts of my kingdom. He didn't leave out, he didn't give any option C here. This was clear. One thing, this is what it means. But here's where it gets better. Not only is this a decree, the order, if you will. Here he does something important. He acknowledges God. He said he is the living God. Not one of. He is the, not a, the living God, whose world is without end, and his kingdom never falls. The king saw this through the faith of Daniel. He goes on about God and says his rule continues eternally. He is Savior and rescuer. He performs astonishing miracles in heaven and on earth. He saved Daniel from the power of the lions. Storms never last. The storm of when others are against us. We're out of time today, friends. We got one more part of this, and I'll bring that back to you tomorrow, Lord willing. But I want us to think about the power of this story. I want you to understand, I hope you already have, how much bigger this is than just a simplified children's version. Not that that's wrong. We certainly want them to hear these great stories. But I want you to be challenged. I know I have been, even at my own words. I want you to be challenged. How visible, that's the word for today. How visible is your faith? And I'm not talking about the words that you use. I'm talking about the life that is seen. For that is our witness. What do people see? It's important. The king saw Daniel's faith so much to the point that not only did he believe that Daniel would be okay, even though the king was wrong for what he had done, but he also came back and he said some mighty incredible things about Daniel and about God. Does our faith change anybody? I still believe it can. In fact, I know it can. And that is a call upon the church today. May we join together across all boundaries and come together under this banner of our living God, who can save us from the lion's den, the enemy, and from all of those who come against us, that we stand mightily under his might, mightily under his power, and mightily under his grace and mercy, and show others that hope is real. God bless you. I'll bring you the rest of this tomorrow. Take care. Have a good night. Bye-bye.